You guys voted for these 4 Hugo Award winners. I read them, and now it's time to rank them. Hello BookTube, I'm Jonathan, and welcome to Words in Time. In today's video, I'm going to be giving mini reviews for these 4 Hugo Award-winning sci-fi books, although I use the term sci-fi a little bit loosely today, as we'll find out later on. And if you guys like the voting process on what I get to read, well, stick around for later in the video as I actually do my first ever patron pick. We'll find out what my patrons have picked for me to add to my October TBR. So let's get into these ones, starting with Waystation. The seemingly ageless Enoch Wallace is an American Civil War veteran and lives a reclusive life on a backwoods farm. But rather than being a farmer, he is actually the keeper of an intergalactic waystation. So the first thing that I liked about Waystation was the writing style. For me, I found that Clifford D. Simak's prose was poetic, but without being self-indulgent, and it was vividly descriptive, but without ever bogging down the pacing of the book. And even though this book deals with some rather heavy things, I always felt a sense of kind of warmth or coziness while reading it, which made it overall a very lovely read. I think if you're a fan of John Wyndham, even though he's very British and Simak is very American, that there might be some qualities that cross over there, which mean you might enjoy Simak's writing as well. The second thing that I really enjoyed about Waystation was the exploration of themes. Whether it was war and technology or society and relationships, I really liked how Simak approached these rather large topics, but gave them a real personal meaning. He's definitely not as comedic, but I felt a little bit of a sense of Kurt Vonnegut in his writing as well, and could appeal to fans of his like me. I don't really have any dislikes for Waystation. If I had to nitpick, I guess I could say that the plot progression could have been a little bit more exciting, and Simak could have maybe pushed some of the sci-fi concepts a little bit further, but that wasn't what this book was really about. I feel like in this book, Simak was going for atmosphere and the thoughts and the ideas, and I think he really achieved both of those in terms of creating a very specific tone and creating a really thought-provoking novel. I have a full-length review for this one if you're interested, but spoiler alert, I loved it. 9 out of 10. Alright, we're off to a good start. Up next, The Demolished Man by Alfred Bester. The Demolished Man is set in a world where the police force has telepathic powers and crime is very low. But when things come to a head with Ben Reich and his main business rival, he decides to plan the impossible: a murder. So there were a few things that I liked about The Demolished Man, starting with the premise. I think it's a great hook, and that central idea captured my imagination right away, and I was on board early in the book. I also like the character of Ben Reich, and while I wouldn't say he was likable, I did always find him intriguing because he was rather paranoid, rather neurotic, and I never quite knew what he was going to do next. And thirdly, I think I've decided that I like the ending. Why have I phrased it like that? Well, this book kind of takes a bit of a turn that's somewhat insane. It's kind of a mad ending that I think straddles the line between genius and nonsense. And I'll be very interested to see your reactions, which way you guys go on it. I think I've decided that I quite like it. I pondered on it for a bit. Thumbs up from me. Moving on to the dislikes, I really didn't connect with the character of Lincoln Powell. As the main detective trying to solve this crazy case, I feel like there's a lot of potential there that character just did not live up to. I was not really entertained by him and was not really invested in his outcomes. And a second dislike is that there was a romance subplot in this book which I found to be rather weird and unnecessary, so fortunately that wasn't a major focus of the book because I definitely think it could have been done without. So overall, I think there were a few really good ideas in this book. There were just a couple of elements that didn't quite click for me, and it didn't quite build to what I thought it potentially could have. For me, The Demolished Man was a 6.5 out of 10. So I was a little mixed there. Let's see if we can get back on track with The City and the City by China Miéville. A murder looks like a routine case for Inspector Borlu, but as he investigates, the evidence leads him from the city of Basel to Ui Coma. The evidence points to deadly conspiracy theories, and the journey is like no other, one as psychic as it is physical. So the first thing that I liked about The City and the City was the connection between the two cities. So I don't want to go into too much detail, I don't want to spoil anything, but the way these two cities are connected are not the same as two cities in our world, where you just drive on down a highway or you pop on over the bridge to get from one to the other. There's something a bit more interesting going on here. It's somewhat of a storyline in and of itself and a mystery that kind of intrigued me and helped pull me through the book. And that tied into some of the thematic explorations, which were happening on a literal level, but they were also being explored through the subtext. I'm not sure if any of them landed super hard that I really connected with, but there's always enough going on that there was always at least something for me to think about. Unfortunately, I do have to move on to some dislikes, starting with the characters, particularly the main character of Inspector Borlu. Did we find out really anything interesting about his backstory? I don't think so. Did he really have his own motivation or storyline within this case, within this story? I don't think so. Did we get much more than just him being a guy trying to solve this case? I don't know, maybe I missed it, but that's 2 books in a row where we've had a lead detective in kind of cool settings, and they haven't done anything cool at all. Like, when I think of a detective, I think of a cool guy wearing a cool hat, he's got a trench coat with his collar popped up, and he's smoking, and he says cool stuff like, "Yeah, doll, everyone's a criminal if you look close enough, even me." Like, I'm not Raymond Chandler, but you get the point. That's 2 detective novels in a row where 2 detectives didn't say anything cool the whole book. Someone recommend me a detective sci-fi book, please. Okay, moving on to my second dislike, I felt like we got quite a lot of repetition in this book. Characters would give us lines of dialogue like, "Asking those kind of questions was trouble. She was asking questions about the wrong kind of people. Those were dangerous questions to be asking around here. No good was ever gonna come of asking those questions." I was like, yeah, okay, we get it. Maybe for some people that was building the tension, but for me, I just kind of wanted to move on with it. And lastly, and this one might say more about me as a reader than the writing itself, but there was a lot of references to computer terminology, like, "I went online and checked her MySpace, and then I headed over to the cityandthecity.org, and then my partner forwarded me a .jpeg." And I was always like, why do you feel the need to specify that it's a JPEG? Like, was anybody on the edge of their seat wondering whether it was going to be a JPEG or a PNG? Like, forget about this murder, let's get to the bottom of this case of the missing file type. And I'm kind of exaggerating a little bit, but as someone that reads a lot of sci-fi, I'm used to writers kind of going out of their way to distinguish the setting of the book from our present. And I'm not sure whether this was supposed to be a near future or an alternate present, but it really just felt like a writer from 2005 that really just wanted you to know that they knew computer words. Overall, I think The City and the City had a few really intriguing elements, and I'm sure there are going to be people that love this book, especially if they're into contemporary literature, urban fantasy, murder mystery, but for me, as a sci-fi writer, there was just a lot in this book that really didn't click for me. In the end, I'm going to have to give this one a 5 out of 10. So we've kind of lost our way a little bit, but let's see if we can save things with The Snow Queen by Joan D. Vinci. The imperious winter colonists have ruled the planet Tiamat for over 150 years. But soon the galactic Stargate will close, isolating Tiamat, and the 150-year reign of the Summer Primitives will begin. Their only chance at surviving the change is if the ageless corrupt Snow Queen can destroy destiny with a horrific act. So the first thing I liked about the Snow Queen was the characters. In particular, the Snow Queen herself. As a villain, I thought she was rather engaging, had an interesting perspective, and I was always interested in seeing what she was going to do next. In fact, for a book called The Snow Queen, I kind of wanted more of the Snow Queen. I did like a number of the characters, but there were 1 or 2 characters when I was with them, I was thinking, can we get back to the Snow Queen and her scheming? By comparison, you do little to no scheming, alright? Let's get back to that. And the second thing I liked was Vinci's writing. Her prose isn't overly poetic, but every now and again I would just have to stop and think about something that hit me in an unexpected way, or I just found to be rather beautiful or thought-provoking, and that was something that I enjoyed throughout the book. And thirdly, I think the world building was really well executed. Whether I was learning about the winters and the summers, or the difference between Tiamat and the Offworlders, I thought that everything was really fleshed out and really well realized. I really felt like I was living in the places that Vinci was taking me to. Moving on to the dislikes, I feel like the pacing really suffered in the second half of the book. There are a number of things that felt like they dragged to me, and a number of new things that were introduced kind of detracted from the things that I was interested in, but then those things weren't necessarily concluded in an overly satisfying or exciting way. And there were also some sci-fi concepts that were introduced that I found to be really intriguing, but throughout the book, it didn't feel like they really escalated or they really built to something that was more exciting than what was delivered in the first half. So this is a bit of a tough one to score because we've gone from the city and the city to a tale of two cities, or at least a tale of two halves, because I was really enjoying the first half of this book, and then I felt a little underwhelmed by the second half. This is another one that I think leans more towards fantasy than it does to sci-fi, and there's a lot for you to enjoy here in terms of the characters and the world building, but if you're someone that is a little bit more plot driven or one of those sci-fi ideas and concepts to be pushed a little bit further, explored a little bit more thoroughly, then like me, I'm not sure if the second half will hit for you. In the end, I'm going to have to say the Snow Queen was a 7 out of 10 for me. So my reading experience was a little bit of a mixed bag. Waystation was definitely my favorite, with the Snow Queen and the Demolished Man in the middle and the city behind them. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what your thoughts were, and more importantly than my score for the books, I have a score for you. I'm going to have to give those 4 winners an average of 7 out of 10. So you guys did an okay job. I'm intrigued to see whether my patrons do any better with their pick for my October TBR. Let's find out what I'm going to be reading this month. Here we go, guys. Let's spin the wheel to find out what my October TBR pick from my patrons is going to be. Depending on your patron role, you get a certain amount of votes to allocate. So we'll see who comes out on top. Let's spin this thing. Okay, what's it going to land on? Spinning, spinning, spinning. Oh my goodness, Dragonflight. Okay, so Dan... No, don't celebrate that. Put the confetti away. Dan convinced me that this was sci-fi because, you know, sci-fi, a genre famous for its dragons. I don't know. I've been told it is sci-fi. I'm going to give it a chance. I'm not going to override the wheel, but I'm not happy about it. So there you go. Let me know if you'd be interested in joining me for that one. And if you'd like to be a part of the voting process, check out the information for the Patreon memberships in the description, and you can be like these very cool people and help me pick out what to read in November. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe, and you can find more sci-fi content over here.